Greetings EPQers and welcome to the EPQ presentation. No, that wasn't that funny, was it? No, fair enough. Anyway, moving on, what is expected from you in your EPQ presentation? Well, when you've finished the written elements to it, or rather most of the written elements to it, you will be giving a 10-minute project presentation. Followed by approximately 2 minutes of questions from the audience, from the people who are watching it, both the examiners, i.e. me or us, there's often 2 members of staff, and whoever else is watching it. And that may not be anyone else, given that it could be online, but we'll see. Anyway, hopefully this presentation will cover both eventualities. Now, this is part of the AO4 section, and it's put together with a written evaluation of the project. So even though this section is out of 9, it's not solely on the presentation, although rather confusingly the presentation is given a score out of 9. So don't get confused. If you get 9 for your presentation, that doesn't mean you've got 9 for the AO4 section. It is combined with your evaluation. So do remember that. And if the presentation's a bit of a disaster and the written evaluation is brilliant, then you can still do reasonably okay in that section. So anyway, you're going to be delivering a 10-minute presentation on the project, and you'll have to answer some questions from the audience after it. That's the kind of takeaway from the beginning. So let's get stuck into some details. Now, what seems to be the winning formula is that you deliver a PowerPoint presentation based around the following structure. Yeah, now you could use some exotic presentational software like Prezi. That was occasionally popular, had its brief moment in the sun. There are other presentational software things available, but we know PowerPoint works. We know PowerPoint is compatible with Office 365, and especially if you're having to deliver your presentation online via Teams, I would recommend using PowerPoint, although it is not compulsory. In the past, there have been the odd student who's shown up and drawn words on the whiteboard and gone their own way. More often than not, it's been a bit of a disaster, but there have been some great presentations that are not based around PowerPoint. I think I would just strongly recommend using it though. So how does it need to be structured? Well, start off with the question. So what question did you ask? And that's about 1 minute. So the intricacies of the question, how you got there. Then talking about the research review for 4 minutes. Then we recommend talking about the discussion for 4 minutes, breaking it down into its constituent parts. And then you finish at the end with 1 minute of project evaluation. So how did the project go? What went well? What didn't go so well? What would you do in the future if you had more time? What other areas need a bit more investigation? So that's how you would break down that 10 minutes. Now let's look at some of those things in a little bit more detail. So 1 minute, and 1 minute really flies when you're presenting. Or rather, it's one of those strange things, isn't it? So you could be talking for a minute and just go, or you could be talking for a minute and it just feels like a year. It depends on what you're talking about and all sorts of other things. So what you need to cover in your minute is, what is the question? And be crystal clear about this. Sometimes people just launch into it, forgetting that the audience don't necessarily know. If I'm marking it, will know, but the other teacher who could be sitting here marking it as well won't have the same kind of level of familiarity. So have a slide that very clearly explains what the question is. Then go on, why did you choose this question? What interested you? Was there a particular fact, figure, statistic? Think back to your project proposal, there'll be some useful stuff there. Very brief, 10 seconds, how did you develop it and refine it? And again, this will only be a sentence. So initially I did a project on, should we legalize drugs? And then I realized that drugs was just too big, so I narrowed it down to cannabis. Or, I did a project on, should we regulate the internet? And then I realized that was too vast, so I focused in on social media companies, or I focused in on Twitter, or something like that. So literally just a sentence or two, because remember you've got 60 seconds, and that will absolutely fly by. When you have done that, and maybe this is a bit more important than how you develop the question and refine the question. So depending on the nature of your question, it could be a good idea to spend more time on this and less on how it develops. But specific wording. So why did you choose a specific word? But also, is there a specific meaning to some of the words? Now, we all understand what social media is, but if you've used social media in a particular way, then why did you use that meaning in the question? Again, think about the nature of the question. Some of the more technically complex worded questions will require a bit of a, I chose this particular word or phrase or thing, and others will be relatively simple. So again, it's up to you. It's very much your judgment. So why did you choose the question? How did you develop it? And are there any specific meanings of words that we need to understand? So the next thing is the research review. So again, this is all going to be quite project specific. So is there some key terminology that you need to understand? And again, sometimes there won't be. Whereas if you're doing something really quite medically based or legally based, and there's some complex terminology that is necessary for us to understand the discussion, then you'll need to explain what that is. But essential only. Don't say the Oxford Dictionary defines success as blah blah blah. No, we know success. We've got an understanding of a pretty good general knowledge understanding of a lot of things. Now, have a look at so the other thing that obviously needs to be in your research review thing is going to be how you reached some key definitions. And again, it's all project specific. So if you're doing a project on that explores something like racism or freedom or drug use or something like I don't know. It's because I was speaking to a student earlier who's doing an EPQ on legalizing drugs. It's not a reflection on my moral character. Anyway, so for example, if you're doing an EPQ on racism, racism has got some generally understood meanings. It's got some quite technical meanings. What definition of racism are you using, and how did you get there? So once you've identified those key things, especially if they are important, then move on to a brief summary of your probably 4 sections. Most research reviews will have about 4 sections, could be a bit more. But anyway, what are the kind of key developments in the area that allow us to understand the discussion? So again, it is fundamentally distilling all of the core principles of the research review into 4 minutes, which is tricky. One thing that I would recommend you do, and this is in part because of the way that the presentation is marked, is just be clear and explicit about how they relate to the discussion. So you could even say at the beginning, we need to, in order to understand, my second argument, which is blah blah blah, we need to have an understanding of this word and this concept, because otherwise, you might think it means something a bit different. So you can be explicit about how the research review connects to the discussion. So next, obviously, and unsurprisingly, is the discussion. So what were your 4 main arguments? Again, it could be 3, it could be 5. Just 4 would be the kind of average and traditional number. So what are the 4 main arguments? But again, give a summary of the key evidence that supports them. So break it, and again, you've got 4 minutes, so you've got to be careful. But for example, my first argument was that legalizing drugs was a sensible move from an economic point of view. There was an interesting headline figure that argued that we could contribute £8 billion towards the NHS or other social welfare programs if we taxed and legalized drugs. However, the counter argument to this is that tax avoidance would reduce this figure to 2 billion, and thus some scholars argued that it wouldn't then be worth it. So, we've got my argument, just a key critical statistic piece of evidence, and then my counter argument. So, you can do that in a minute, but make sure your argument is crystal clear. Make sure there is just some crystal clear little bits of evidence and a very crystal clear little counter argument. So don't waffle, don't be too general. Now, when you've done that, once you've got your 4 arguments together, you need to show a very clear answer to the question. And it is again a kind of a restatement of the conclusion that you've written in your EPQ. Remember, the other person who is marking the EPQ presentation will not have read your EPQ. I will have done, so I'll know where you're going, but the other person needs to be given this clear understanding of what your argument is, how it breaks down, what are the absolutely crucial headline bits of evidence that you've used, what are the counter arguments, what is your conclusion. Overall, drugs should be legalized because of the economic benefits they provide, even though there will be negative consequences in terms of mental health in specific areas. Overall, there's a net gain to society, and on that basis, drugs should be legalized. So crystal clear answer, comparison of the 4 different elements of your argument. Why have you gone with the one that you've gone with? So again, none of this is sort of revolutionary, but I guess the trick here is a kind of a restatement in accurate simplicity with a little bit of detail. The last slide, or sort of section, if you like, is evaluation. And this will be a quick minute. And again, it's standard evaluation. What worked, what didn't work, and what would you have done if you'd had more time? What other research would be necessary to understanding your EPQ, or how could you broaden it out? So because of time constraints, I limited my EPQ to exploring the French political system between 1700 and 1800. However, there were crucial developments between 1600 and 1650 that I left out and would love to have included if the scope of the project had been larger. So that just shows a little bit more knowledge. It shows us you've had to narrow stuff down, you've synthesized, you've kind of made things concise, and you've evaluated. It can be other things. Or going back, you can look at different techniques. In future, I would have, if I had my chance again, I would have visited the British Library, because in the last week I suddenly realised there was this amazing series of resources, or a specialist librarian or something like that. And remember, these evaluative ideas and issues and problems and things that you do differently in future, they're not catastrophic admissions of failure. They are things that you get marks for in terms of reflection and evaluation. So that was the cats. If you heard that growl, that was not me. Honest. So again, all of these things are sort of skills and ideas that you've learned in the project. It's just a question of transferring them, in a clear and concise and precise nature to a PowerPoint or other presentation. So following that, you will get a question segment where the examiners and maybe people in the audience will ask you some questions, and you'll have to kind of respond using your knowledge and love of your project. And it'll be fair questions based on things that you've told us about in your presentation. Often as teachers, we might try and, if we feel there's a kind of logical flaw in your argument, or an area that we think, well, maybe you should have explored that, we'll ask that kind of question, and then it's entirely valid for you to justify why you didn't. So you'd say, well, yes, maybe in the future I would do. However, I decided that these 3 areas had so much detail that this 4th area, there wasn't time to explore it properly or thoroughly, or whatever limitations. It's perfectly valid to make that kind of argument. What we're not trying to catch you out. We're just trying to get you to show your knowledge. and your ability to argue and all the skills that you need to. So, then it's not hostile questioning. It's trying to allow you to show your knowledge. If you've missed a little thing in your presentation and I think, oh no, I know they know that and I think it's important, I'll ask that question, because then even though you didn't give it in your main presentation, you showed knowledge of it and your ability to do it in answering the question. So it's really not there to catch you out. It can be a little bit intimidating, so what you can absolutely do is plant a question with a friend in the room, or watching it via a Teams meeting. We haven't yet worked out precisely how we're going to do that, so depends on the situation you find yourself in. But absolutely plant a question with a friend, so when we move to the questions phrase, your friend puts their hand up, asks a question that you know the answer to, and you can show great knowledge and on the spot intellectual kind of analysis. Why not? It's how politics and everything else works these days. A little bit of I don't know, I'm just going to show my ignorance by not knowing the term for it. Cool. Okay, so you've got your presentation, you've got your question segment. That fundamentally is it in terms of structure. So just some style tips. Green is the new black. No, not those kind of style tips. So I think you should. It very much depends on the individual and the content. So if I say 6 slides or 8 slides or 4 slides, there'll always be situations where that isn't appropriate. But if you're doing less than 5 slides, again, it depends on the individual. 4 might be perfect for you and your project and the way you speak. But a slide for the question, slide for the research review, slide for the discussion, slide for the evaluation. I mean, yeah, it's possible. They would probably be quite. I think they might get a bit busy, but again, it's very much up to you. But I think probably 5 as a minimum, maybe 4. Once you get to 10, you're probably getting too far. It slightly depends on how many words you have on a slide. It slightly depends on whether you're showing us an image of a map or a couple of maps, or something that you can go through relatively quickly. But generally, if you've got 10 slides on it, that's a slide a minute, and by the time you've introduced yourself, talked about various things, you'll be pushing it to cover it effectively. You have to be flexible though with this guidance. Again, another thing that I think should be a target, but just think about it, 25 words maximum per slide. And again, if it's 25 words in one sentence, that's too long. If it's 25 words artfully split over the screen, or 30 words artfully split over the screen, it could be excellent. But I think that's the kind of thing that you need to be thinking about. I think this image has got 21 words, and it's, I think it's brilliant. But no, 21 words. You wouldn't want too many more words on this slide before it starts to lose its kind of instant clarity. Another top tip: no animation. Don't have slides whizzing in and things spinning around and dancing all over the place. It's quite fun to do, but it's pretty horrific to watch, and it delays things, and yeah, don't do it. Should you include video? Again, probably not. There's always an exception. There may be some kind of process or system or something that 60 seconds of scientific video really demonstrates brilliantly. Maybe. I'm not saying never. I'm saying it is very, very unlikely. And of course, by all means, have a chat with me. Say this isn't something that you have to keep secret and then reveal to the world. Bring it to me and say, should I use this video? Yeah. But generally avoid videos. Also, if only because you click on the video, absolutely nothing happens. Timer ticks away. You freak out. You get flustered. The whole thing falls apart. So it's just, trust me, as a teacher, it's just another thing to go wrong. The next thing, and again, it's fine balance, but I would say decorate for clarity. So you can see the slide here. There's different colours. and images, and there's definitely a style to it. But I've done that so that you can see the different categories, different things. Don't put in too many kind of whizzy graphics and deep pictures and all that kind of stuff just on a slide with 3 words on, because you'll lose the focus. I guess moving on from kind of animations and videos, the use of images. Now this, I think there's a lot more to be said for. Sometimes, an image of a map, if you're doing something on, British trade, or, D-Day in the Second World War, or, something where, an instant visual will save you a lot of speech, then absolutely put a map up there. By all means, go for it. If there's a particular process, a biological process, and having a kind of diagram image, yeah, that could work brilliantly. Is there a graph that works well? And again, be very careful, because what looks like a good graph on paper to somebody in the background who doesn't actually understand what it is, it can be much less useful. So a very clean, simple graph with 4 bars, or whatever way you want to look at it, that could be excellent if done properly. Be careful, be cautious there. So moving on, the thing that always baffles me every year, this is something that you can practice an almost limitless amount, and so many students just walk in kind of cold and go, oh shit, didn't practice it, but hopefully it'll be all right. Yeah, can also just die on its arse. So I just cannot stress this enough. Practice the presentation and practice the timings. Now with the timings, you need to be aiming for 10 minutes. If you do 9 minutes of pure gold, no problem, absolutely no problem at all. If you do 11 minutes of wonderful geniusness, again, no problem. If you do 8 minutes and it's crap, then you're going to lose marks, especially if it's incomplete. And if you do 12 minutes and you've only just started the research review, as has happened once before, your time management, your understanding of communication is a disaster. So you'll be heavily penalised for that, and you could get in real trouble. So practice your timings. Excuse me. The other thing to do is use a watch. Again, it's not a trick or a trap. Have a big phone with 10 minutes counting down. Check it part way through. Have someone in the crowd, if relevant, tap their nose at 5 minutes or 2 minutes from the end. Use as many time management techniques or strategies as you possibly can. And on that note, if you're looking at your watch 5 minutes in, and you have just finished the question slide and you've got another 9 slides, you're going to have to speed up. You're going to have to think on the fly about how to minimize various slides. And again, depending on your project, your style, all those kinds of things, I couldn't help you with that, but you're going to maybe need to think about some strategies for that. Other things that are crucially important: don't read. The mark scheme is very clear and specific about not reading from a piece of paper. Now, in the more traditional presentations, when there's 16 of you in the room and you're presenting to 15 other people and 2 members of staff or something like that, and it can all be quite nerve-wracking, and you're sitting there reading from the sheet can be a bit of a life raft, or feel like it, but it makes for a really bad presentation. So by all means, have some notes, have some bullet points, have a copy of the slides printed out. I think that's a really good idea, but you need to be familiar enough with the subject, with the arguments, with what you're doing to present ideas rather than read them. Now again, this next tip, depending on how presentations do finally take place, you need to make eye contact. And a great way of making eye contact without making eye contact is, well, doing it over Teams, obviously, but staring at the forehead. Yeah. So if you stare at someone's forehead, it looks like you're making eye contact, but you don't have that awkward moment when they can see inside your soul and pull out every insecurity. So top tip for life and EPQ. So look at someone's forehead and it looks like you're making eye contact with them. Again, that could be quite dependent on how you deliver these presentations. Okay, so let's have a look now at what the examiner will have in front of them. This is the grid that we are given, and these are the things that we assess for the presentation. So again, pay close attention to what is going to be important. So first thing, how clear are the main ideas? What are the 4 key elements of your research review? The economics of France in the 18th century, French society in the 18th century, the French military and French religion in the these 4 big crucial background blocks. Boom, 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 crystal clear. What are the 4 arguments of my EPQ? France was a military success. France was an economic failure. France was a social failure. France was a religious disaster. Therefore, in the 17th century, whilst it has some positive aspects to it, we can describe France as an unsuccessful state, or whatever the EPQ is. So just that clarity of main ideas, both in the research review and the discussion, is important. The next thing, the organisation. So how clear and logical is the structure? Well, if you stick to the structure that we've given you, and especially if you do that thing in the research review of saying, well, actually, it's really important we understand this because of this part of my argument, it should be nice, it should be clear, it should be logical. So if you stick to the plan that we gave you and actually complete it within the time frame, then you should be fine. Pace, that's about timing. So like I said, between 9-ish minutes and 11-ish minutes, if it's good, it's not a problem. Once you get beyond 11 or before 9, if it's bad, then you're going to start losing marks. Voice. So again, it can be really difficult for some, but easier for others. Is the presentation loud and clear? Are you reading aloud? Are you speaking well? And this is, you've got to get in touch with a little bit of your inner actor. I'm not saying overly perform, but think about pace, think about pausing, think about volume, think about delivery. There is a little element of this being a sort of an artistic performance of communication. So don't go to and get special theatre training and turn up and do it through the medium of modern dance, but practice. Visual aids. So this is really referring to the PowerPoint, and if you follow all the tips given, then this should be absolutely fine. And again, if you've got any doubts, bring me a draft, bring me a copy, and I'll have a look and say, oh no, that's carnage on a slide. Trim it down by a third. That's something that a lot of students do wrong. So many students put far too many things on a slide. Easily done, but it is absolute death in terms of effective presentation. Contact with the audience. Again, this is one of the things we talked about in tips. Eye contact. A bit of a smile. Again, not a hard stare and a serial killer smile, but just as tough as it is, imagine that you're talking to friends. But again, note this is something on the mark scheme. All those tips that I was giving you earlier weren't, yes, they're good general presentation tips. But these are things that we mark. So again, practice, even if it feels a bit fake. Look at someone, give them a bit of a smile, address a question directly at them if appropriate. Now, the next element is handling questions. So obviously, when you come to give your presentation, make sure that you've reviewed your EPQ. If there was something that you did 6 months before and haven't really edited it, altered it, or done much with it, make sure you reread your EPQ. Make sure all of it makes sense to you. You can think about where there may be gaps, both in your EPQ and in your presentation. Try and anticipate some questions. I wouldn't stress too much about that. Like I said, our asking of questions is really to give you the chance to show that you know stuff and that you can answer effectively using the knowledge that you've got. So those are the key areas that we'll be looking for in the presentation. So it's no mystery. And as I said, any dramas, just speak to me, and I'll give you some guidance. Okay, so on to the kind of COVID-specific section of things at the moment. Now, maybe that you are delivering your presentation as a recorded PowerPoint, and that is a really relatively simple thing to do. So you create your right, I need a drink. It's not gin and tonic, sadly. So you create your PowerPoint, and then you go to the recording tab. You can see that blue arrow pointing to the recording tab. You click that button, and then you will get a record slideshow button, which you click. And then when you click on record from beginning, which is what you should do, you will then get this screen, and you will get the PowerPoint. You will get the picture of you in the bottom corner, and then you will have the option to record, which is in the top left as you look at it. Anyway, you can see the big red record button. So you press the record button, and it will count down 3, 2, 1, and then it will start recording. So you start speaking, you start your presentation. You can have your timer next to you, wherever you like. And then when you want to move forward to the next slide, you click the right arrow. I mean, this is basic stuff, but just making sure that it's crystal clear. And you keep recording, clicking through, just give the presentation. Make sure when you're done, you press stop, and then you'll click the little X, get out of the kind of the video window, and then make sure you save, because it's really quite tedious if you record this and then it doesn't save properly. So make sure you save before you go on to the next stage. Now, just a top tip for you. Basically, although this is, you can turn it into a single video. At this point, the videos are actually attached to the individual slides. So you can, if you do you do a great analysis of the question, your research review is brilliant, and then your cats burst in for the discussion and start screaming and jumping up and down on the keyboard, then you can stop, obviously with the button on the left, and then you can clear the recording for that slide, which is really useful. You don't have to start again. You can just clear the recording for the slide, reshoot it, and keep going. Now, obviously, you need to have a little bit of a think about what you just said before and continuity, and it's not really proper video editing by any means, but it is quite useful. Just if something disastrous happens, you can just reshoot from the from the beginning of the slide. And so as a result, I would probably leave a breath every time you click the arrow, so that then, if there is a continuity issue with the next slide, you can relatively seamlessly. And again, we don't want to get into kind of Pixar style video editing. Don't stress about that. But if you're chopped through a sentence, it can be a little less slick. So then, once you've done that, once you've recorded the video PowerPoint, if you like, make sure you save it. But what you need to do next is save it as a video. So click export to the first arrow, then create video. Then don't save it in full HD, because Baslic's system probably won't be able to cope with sending files that large. What you need to do is click on that box, drop it right down to standard, and then save it as a standard file. It's fine. It's what I do all my stuff in. And then once you've done that, click that create video button underneath the sort of full HD, choosing the video resolution, and then it will take you back to the PowerPoint, and at the bottom you'll see a very slow moving bar which will turn that PowerPoint into a kind of single seamless video, and that will that'll end up in the same file as the PowerPoint, and they can be pretty large, so just be a bit careful. I mean 10 minutes won't be too large, but just make sure you've got storage, because otherwise it will get a bit dramatic. Good. So again, Now, this could be another way in which you deliver the PowerPoint, and I'm really just telling you this now so that you can practice it if you need to. But you may be sending us a video PowerPoint, you may be doing it live over Teams. Now, if you're doing it live over Teams, it will probably be in the EPQ team. We might set up a special presentation team, who knows. But you will be speaking, you have to be managing your time with your PowerPoint open in front of you, and presenting almost as if there were other people in the room. So what you'll have to do before you start is share your PowerPoint. So if you see the top blue arrow that's pointing to the little arrow coming out of the box, you'll need to click that button once you've started a meeting, and you can probably start a meeting and practice this if you want to. Then that's the screen below will pop up, and then you've got the second blue arrow where you click on Browse, and then you'll have the option to upload the PowerPoint from your computer. So once you've uploaded it, you'll then see the PowerPoint in front of you, and with the arrows at the top that I've highlighted with the blue arrow, you can move through the PowerPoint. So you'll probably be given time to set it up. You'll get into that position, then the teacher will start the timer, and you can move through the PowerPoint, talking and moving the slides as you need to. Now, I don't know whether we will. There may be a slight safeguarding issue about this, because in theory you're not supposed to send videos of yourself. I don't know whether that will be different for EPQ because it's a kind of exam. We'll get back to you on that. But that arrow that the second arrow there is the video arrow. So if you turn that on, then obviously your face will appear, and you can talk through the PowerPoint, moving it backwards and forwards. So yeah, again, nothing magical or strange about that, but just for those of you maybe wanting to practice or wondering how it worked, those are probably the two ways that you may be assessed in this time of plague, via a PowerPoint video or via a more live Teams presentation. Good, well, that's certainly it from me in terms of presentations. As always, look at the handbook. It's got everything in here and more. As always, look at the exemplars. I just can't stress that enough. Of course, contact me, but handbook, exemplars, glory, A stars, place at university, champagne on the beach, etc., etc. Anyway, that's it from me. So take care, and we'll catch up in the next lesson.